Hi, boys and girls. It is time for social studies. We started our new unit yesterday, learning about colonial towns and townspeople. And yesterday we started reading about a country family, a person who lived in the country outside of a colonial town, and what they had to do to live, because they had to raise their own animals, grow their own food, make their own clothes, get their own water. They didn't have electricity. So their lives were pretty different than ours were right now. They worked every single day to live, to survive. And since they didn't have grocery stores and things like that. Well, today we're going to read about that country family coming to town and what they're going to do in town and why. So I think it'll be a fun story. Are you ready? Let's get started. All right. Imagine you lived in the country long ago and were preparing to visit the nearest town. A trip to town was not an everyday event. 300 years ago, there were no cars or trains. Your parents would have had to taken you by horse and wagon, and the going was slow. Because you wouldn't have wanted to leave your animals alone or your crops uncared for at home for a very long time, trips to town were pretty rare. You didn't do it very often. And why might you have needed to go to town? Normally, everyone in your family helped to make the most of what you needed on your farm. But there were always a few things that your family couldn't make themselves, like some iron nails or a new pair of shoes. Or that it would simply have taken too much time to make at home, like grinding wheat into flour or making cloth for a new shirt. Fortunately, there were different kinds of tradespeople in town who were specialists or experts at many of these jobs that couldn't have been done at home or that took too long. And how would you have paid these tradespeople for all the things you needed? Farmers usually brought a load of goods to sell, or they might have bartered or exchanged some eggs or butter for the cloth you needed to make new clothes. If you bartered products that you brought from your farm, you swapped or traded what you brought for something you wanted from that trade person. You would not pay money, you would trade. So you might have brought along some vegetables or even a chicken to trade. So do you guys take chickens to the grocery store to trade for other food? No, we don't do that anymore. The first stop on your trip to town, at least in a large town, most likely would have been in a town square. Most of the shops and important buildings were located in or around the town square. And unlike the country, buildings were built close together, which made it possible for you to visit several shops on the same day. And our towns are like that now. They put a lot of shops close together, so you don't have to drive or go far away to go to different places. The town square was the place where the mayor and other town leaders made speeches or important announcements. The town square was also where townspeople met to talk and gossip with their friends. And this is how they learned the latest news. Because they didn't have phones like we have. And so they always had to talk to each other and see each other when they wanted to talk or let somebody know what was going on. From the town square, you probably headed to the nearby trading post or general store. This is where farmers could buy, sell, or trade things. At the trading post or general store, you might have traded the vegetables, grains, or dairy products you brought with you for tools, cloth, or supplies that you needed. If you were visiting a typical town in colonial days, here is where your trip in town would end. Most smaller towns had only one general store, a place where farmers could trade their crops to get basic supplies that they could not make at home. However, let us imagine you are visiting a very large town where you could see and do much more. If you looked near the river, you may have seen a mill, a building where wheat was ground between large stones to make large amounts of flour. Mills were almost always on the river because the flowing water was needed to turn the huge water wheel that made the large, flat stones inside turn and grind the wheat. If you had visited the miller, no doubt you would have brought freshly harvested wheat or corn from your farm for the miller to grind into flour. Once it was ground into flour, you would have been able to take it home to bake bread, cakes, and other good things to eat. Next, you may have stopped in the baker's shop and bought freshly baked rolls and bread. What a treat for your family. That sounds delicious, doesn't it? If you were a rich farmer, you may have visited the hatter for a new hat or the dressmaker to buy a new dress for your daughter. Instead of buying cloth, you may have just bought yourself a new shirt from the tailor. And you would have had to visit the all-important cobbler who would have made you a new pair of strong leather shoes. The blacksmith was an important specialist in town with his own set of tools and skills. The blacksmith built fires to melt iron so he could pound it into horseshoes and nails that you needed. He also worked hard to make many of the same metal tools that you used back on your farm. In the busy town, each of the tradespeople and the merchants had something special to offer people who lived in the country. And just as you had much needed fresh food to offer them, for the next few days, you'll be learning more about some of these special people. And we'll be learning about bread makers, the millers that grind the flour, the bakers, the tailors that make the clothes, the blacksmith. We'll be learning about all these people that we talked about and what their jobs were like, and more about what their life was like in colonial towns. Okay, boys and girls, have a good day.